Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me, my books, and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com, as well as on Amazon. And my books are also on audio as well. Now, I'm happy to have a return guest on. Her name is Esther Deutsch. The last time she was on was season 5, episode 255, where we talked about the part 1. Conflict is good for business in family court. Today we're going to talk about part 2, and what happened to her next was Esther's going to talk about how she was trying to protect her 3 children and was punished by her ex-husband and the court for doing so. She was incarcerated in Nassau County Correctional Facility for posting on Facebook a public cry for help regarding her son being abused by his father. And this is what happens to our First Amendment rights. So everyone's got to listen to this. There's going to be a lot to learn. So I welcome you, Esther Deutsch. Thank you for speaking out.
Thank you, Marianne, for having me back on.
I'm
I
glad to
appreciate
have
it.
you on. I'm
Thank
very,
you.
very sorry this has happened. So, when all that happened, how shocking.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, unless you haven't been through the system yourself, it's just so hard to believe.
Right.
The all the corruption and the cruelty, that the family court is responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I'm going to continue from our first podcast session. So I'll continue that timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended off on that one with Judge Rademacher incarcerated me on January 6, 2020, because I posted a public outcry for help that my son was being abused by his father.
Mm.
On January 8th, 2020, Judge Rademacher forced me to hire my fourth attorney, which I did not want to, but I had no choice because every time I didn't say what he wanted on the record, he would motion for the bailiff to come up behind me and cuff me. And so I had no choice but to agree to get another attorney, even though every person has a right to proceed pro se.
They do.
Yes, absolutely. Um, the orders of the first order of protection against me was issued by Judge Goodstein just a month prior to that, about a month prior. And those orders of protection would be renewed against me 13 times over the next 4 years without me receiving any hearing, without any due process, without my ex filing a motion showing good cause as to why he would need this, unlawful order of protection against me. And those orders of protection were renewed as a temporary order, which is done deliberately so that it cannot be appealed in the appellate court. And that's done by design. Within the orders of protection against me is a gag order that states that I may not post anything on social media pertaining to my kids, both directly and indirectly. And of course, that's a clear violation of free speech. It's overly broad. It's a prior restraint on speech. But Judge Rademacher added to that as well. He said that I may not even reach out to my children's teachers to inquire about them, which is just unbelievable.
Yeah, these judges are alienators,
Oh,
sociopaths.
absolutely. Absolutely. That is the intention. The intention is to completely, you know, destroy the relationship between the protective parent and the child.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what they do, and that's how abusers like my ex are able to weaponize the family court system to, help them do this as well. And so for the next 4 years after, I kept asking for supervised visitation to see my kids, and I was denied. I mean, it's ridiculous that I would even need supervised visitation with my kids, but the courts wouldn't even give me that. I kept asking for supervised visitation or therapeutic visitation, and all of my requests were denied. I filed every motion possible, made every possible written and oral request to the court, and they were all denied for no good reason.
No.
And even if I am so-called crazy, isn't that what supervised visitation is for?
Right.
And that they wouldn't even give me that. And which is just so incredibly cruel. I mean, heroin addicts, convicted murderers, they get supervised visitation with our kids, but me, I mean, I've been a good devoted mother to my kids and I'm being denied supervised visitation. It just makes absolutely no sense. And the two, of course, this is what my ex wanted, and everybody's on board with him. And the two attorneys for the children, Jill Stone and Gail Berkowitz, they they also did not have a good reason as to why my kids shouldn't even see me supervised. And for
Mhm.
example, Jill Stone, in a affidavit to the court, she wrote that I'm dangerous. One word, that's it. She did not give a reason how I'm dangerous, why I'm dangerous, not even one example. I mean, that is just ridiculous. Like in a court of law, you can't just label somebody
Mhm.
without having any evidence to back it up.
Same here. Yes, I'm dangerous too.
Wow. Yeah. So this is their MO.
Hmm.
Um, And Gail Berkowitz, she said, the mother, she used to be a good mother, but something happened to her and now she's mentally unwell. And of course, they're
Ooh.
going back to my Facebook posts, me trying to get help for my son when I tried everything else. And they're using that as an example that I'm mentally unwell, again, without any evidence to back it up. And and I tried everything. I went to before posting on Facebook, I tried everything. I went to two family courts. There were two CBS investigations. I went to the police. I reached out to the Attorney General's office, the DA's office, over a dozen rabbis,
Mhm.
numerous professionals and organizations, and no one would help my kids. So, what is a desperate mother to do after she tried everything? I mean, the only thing left for me to do was to post a public outcry for help and see if somebody would help my kids that way.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and it's just incredible the gaslighting, how they conveniently and dishonestly will look away. The court actors will look away from the fact that my ex is a sadistic abuser, and they'll pin this false narrative on me that I am now mentally unwell for posting on Facebook. It's just incredible.
And somehow Jill Stone and Gail Berkowitz, those are attorneys, right?
Yes, attorneys for the children.
Well, they're third-party parasites. We'll call them that. But
Yeah,
they're now suddenly medical doctors. How does that happen?
correct. Exactly. Exactly. Like there's zero medical evidence that I'm not well, but yet they're slapping these labels on, like you said, like they're suddenly professionals that can do that.
No. And see, parents don't understand that when you walk through those doors of family court, suddenly the judge becomes a psychiatrist and a doctor and whatever he wants to be that day.
Exactly. And most of all, the biggest lie is that they all claim to protect the best interest of the child. They keep using that,
Hmm.
moniker ad nauseum
Ugh.
when they're doing just the opposite and they're sanctioning the torture and abuse of children. So,
In more
um,
ways than one.
oh, absolutely, for sure, for sure. And and just to go back to CBS for a second, I mentioned that there were two CBS investigations. When I took my son to the first interview at CPS, this is Nassau County CPS, I wanted to show the caseworker supporting evidence of my son being abused, and she refused to look at it. Her name is Yolanda Hutcherson, and she said to me, she said, "You need to show that to a judge. I'm not allowed to look at that," which
Uh,
didn't make sense to me.
no,
Yeah, right. I found out after that that wasn't true. And then, then in the family courts, the judges don't want to give me a hearing. And and so they're both, the family court and CPS, they're both deflecting responsibility.
hmm
They're both, shirking responsibility and deflecting accountability onto the other. So there's like nowhere to turn. There's nowhere to go. So of course, as a desperate mother, I did what I felt might help my kids, which was to post on Facebook. And they use that because that's the only example that they have, to label me as mentally unwell. I mean, they've tried over the years every which way to discredit me and they couldn't. And so, because they have nothing concrete to pin on me, the only thing that they can say is she's mentally unwell, just a sweeping label without any evidence to back it up.
and they all
So
do it.
they all do it. Exactly. And, they can get away with it because, again, it's the secrecy of the courtrooms, the gag orders, the sealed case that allows them to get away with all
Mhm.
this cruelty and corruption.
Mhm.
And again, what they would do is they would, if my child, if any of my children had issues, they would pin it on me. It's all because the mother posted on Facebook in December of 2019 that the kids have issues, while conveniently ignoring the fact that the reason why they may have issues is because they are in the custody of a dangerous and sadistic abuser. So again, just unbelievable gaslighting.
That happened in my case as well. They flip it. It's that Darvo, deny attack, reverse victim offender. And they're
Exactly.
deflecting that onto you. My ex did that the same. This is
Yeah,
go.
it's it's a standard playbook.
Yes, it
Sorry.
is.
Yeah, it is. It's a standard playbook for a lot of cases in a lot of family courts. So moving on to my fourth attorney that I was forced to hire.
Mm.
So his name is Tom Liotti. Now, Tom did file motions and requests to the court that I should see my kids and that these unlawfuls orders of protection be dismissed. He did do that,
Mhm.
but what he did not do, and what none of my attorneys did, all five, was he did not utilize whatever leverage I did have in my case. So, for example, there were many opportunities to file contempt motions against my ex. He was violating court orders all the time and getting away with it. Not a single one of my five attorneys would file a motion to hold him in contempt. Now, my ex is filing all these contempt motions against me,
Ah,
frivolous and malicious contempt motions. It would only make sense to cross motion that with a contempt motion against him, but none of them did that. And so, I mean, I'll give you some examples. So, um, when I had exclusive occupancy of the marital home, at the beginning of my case, my ex would just come onto the property, come into the house when I wasn't there. He even hired the pool company to open the pool for him to use, charge it to my credit card, and that he wasn't allowed to do that because I had exclusive occupancy of the house. If I would have done that, his attorney would have filed a contempt motion immediately after. And at that time, my attorney was Stephen Gassman, and he just, he didn't do anything about that, didn't even note it to the court, not at all. Another example is that my ex never submitted documentation regarding our marital assets. And that was also violating a court order throughout the 6 years of our divorce, where he refused to disclose transparency of our marital assets. and he was supposed to submit full documentation by February 8th, 2000.
Now tell me more about this forensic accountant.
Okay, so there was a forensic accountant that was appointed by the court. Of course, they're also supposedly neutral, but they're not. And he was supposed to collect documentation disclosing transparency of our marital assets from my ex. And the forensic accountant was supposed to submit his report to the court by March 25th, 2019. And my ex did not comply with that order. He would not submit documentation of the marital assets that were needed to disclose transparency of our assets. And so he kept violating that court order, and he was playing all sorts of games with that. So he kept violating that court order throughout the entire 6 years of our divorce, and not a single attorney would agree to file a motion to hold him in contempt for that and to compel him to submit documentation. And so Tom Liotti, my fourth attorney, he refused to go after that. I was so consumed with my kids for the first few years of our divorce that I completely ignored the finances. But my attorneys shouldn't have. It was their job to go after that and make sure that, my ex was submitting documentation of our assets. So Tom refused to go after that. He also, not one of my attorneys, all five, not one of them did discovery and depositions, which is also very unusual.
Mhm.
My fifth attorney finally did send a notice of deposition to my ex because I kept asking him, but my ex just decided he didn't bother showing up to the deposition, didn't even email my attorney to let him know that he wasn't going to show. And my attorney did nothing about it, didn't file a motion to compel him to be deposed, did not inform the court. And again, so the court is, allowing my ex to get away with all of it, with, violating court orders, but my attorneys are also.
Mhm.
And, a deposition could be very valuable because my ex, he's very smooth until you cross examine him. Not that he was ever cross examined in court, but even when I would question him, because he lies so much, his stories are never consistent.
Mhm.
And, if he would have been deposed, he would have perjured many times. And, that could be very valuable as far as proving his lack of credibility.
Mhm.
But not a single one of my attorneys agreed to do that. And and so, although Tom is filing these motions for me to see my kids,
Mhm.
he's essentially protecting my ex's financial interests and not mine.
Oh,
Another issue was that, okay, my ex filed an application with a court that I pay him child support, and the judge granted it. This is Judge Erica Prager, the third judge in our case.
God.
She granted that I pay my ex child support, and I was forced to pay him child support for those years after, every month. And it's just incredible because my ex had the marital home at that time. He has millions of dollars of our marital assets that he's controlling. He earns a seven-figure income. I was the full-time mother, primary caretaker for our kids. I was financially destitute, and yet I'm forced to pay him child support every month. So you just can't make this stuff up.
And on top
And
of that, they're not to interrupt, but they're calling you
no, it's okay.
crazy. So if you're crazy, technically,
Right.
how can you pay child support? They can't have it both ways.
Exactly. And yet they still do. Exactly. Yeah. And every penny that I had was going to attorneys. I was homeless at that time, living by a friend, and yeah, every penny was going to Tom.
Ah,
And um my ex, in the beginning part of my divorce, my ex, there was a court order that my ex pay me spousal maintenance every month. So he was ordered to pay me directly $3,000 a month, which again, like when you're earning a seven-figure income, I don't know where they took that $3,000 a month from. It's like they took it out of, thin air. But I did not challenge it. I was, again, like so consumed with my kids. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to learn to live on less.
Hmm.
And so I
Hmm.
did. And and my ex would play all these games with the maintenance also. Like there was a 10-month period where he wouldn't pay me. He would pay it he would pay $3,000 every month to SCU, which is Support Collections Unit, because they wouldn't release it to me. So he would play all these games just so I shouldn't have it. He didn't mind paying it as long as I didn't get it. And so I would have to file all these motions, and it was like $15,000 to file motions with a court to get that released. And then in 2024, he stopped paying me maintenance altogether, just on his own, because he can get away with it and the court
Right.
will not hold him responsible for it. And yeah, so that was that. And then another issue, like for example with Tom, is um, the custody evaluator in our case, Dr. Yohananoff, after he submitted his bogus 64-page report to the court, I eventually, after that, I had three highly esteemed, two forensic psychiatrists and a forensic psychologist evaluate me. And they determined that I do not suffer from a mental illness, that I do not have a personality disorder, and that I should see my kids.
Hmm. Hmm.
One of the forensic psychiatrists, Dr. Michael Stone, he submitted a report to the court because he was going to testify on my behalf as an expert witness. And in his report, he included bits and pieces from Dr. Yohananoff's report to, challenge what Dr. Yohananoff wrote in his report. Now, these forensic reports, the custody evaluator reports, are kept very tightly sealed by the court. Again, for the same reason is that they don't want the corruption getting out, because these reports are so full of junk science that
Hmm.
even a layperson can, challenge these reports. And and so I knew that I wasn't allowed to share any of the custody evaluator's report with a third party. What I did not know was that I couldn't share the custody evaluator's report with my own mental health provider. That didn't make sense to me. A
Hmm.
report about myself, I should be able to share that with my own mental health
Hmm.
provider.
It makes
And so,
sense.
yeah, exactly. So I submitted the report to Tom, and Tom submitted it to the court. And I got into major trouble for that. It was such a hassle because my ex looks for every little thing to get me, and so he did. And so it was just proceedings with the court, and again more money and more motions and more time. And the issue was that Tom was supposed to redact every bit of Dr. Yohananoff's report from Dr. Stone's report, and he didn't do that. Now, Tom is a very seasoned attorney. He has a lot of experience. I don't know if it was deliberate on his part. It could have just been a sloppy, just sloppy incompetence on his part. I don't
Hmm.
know. But either way, it was, a big hassle that ended up costing me all this money.
Hmm.
And just generally I had concerning billing issues with Tom, so I ended up firing him as well.
Hmm.
And I didn't need him to write motions for me because I am capable of writing motions on my own. I've written many motions to the court, but what I can't do is I cannot do discovery and depositions. That's more complicated. I have no experience with that. And that is precisely what I needed a lawyer for at that time.
Hmm.
And he wouldn't do any of that. So that was that. And so now I'm back to being pro se again. And I was pro se for about a year after that. Um, Now, oh, I just want to go back for a second. I'm sorry. I just want to clarify something that I said on our first podcast session regarding Dr. Yohananoff's report. He wrote as part of his conclusion that I am gatekeeping my kids, and that's why my ex should get custody. Now, gatekeeping is another term for alienation, but I'd
Mm-hmm.
like to clarify there's a very big difference between alienation and PAS, which is parental alienation syndrome, that is
Mm-hmm.
used as a junk theory in the courts.
Mm-hmm.
So, PAS is when the courts use that to divert attention from the abusive parent
Mm-hmm.
and to pin this false narrative that the other parent is alienating the children from the abuser. Now, when a protective mother, is trying to protect her kids from an abusive father, that is not alienation, that is protection.
Mm-hmm.
But alienation is a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm experiencing right now with my kids. In addition to my children being kept from me illegally, they're also being, brainwashed and poisoned with lies against me.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's real. That alienation, that is real, that is rampant when a narcissistic uh, parent manipulates the child to reject the other parent. That's real alienation. So I just wanted to clarify the distinction between the two, unless
No,
in case that
that's
was
right.
confusing.
And it's child psychological abuse, and these judges and these third-party parasites are participating in all of this, in
Absolutely,
destroying a child's soul,
yeah, and they're
emotional,
doing
everything.
exactly, and they're doing this deliberately.
Yes, for money.
Yeah, exactly. For money. And, I think that also the matrimonial field attracts low quality people. I think that these are people that, they have no empathy either. So, in addition to being greedy, they have no conscience or empathy if they're able to do this to mothers and children.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're
Um,
sociopaths.
exactly. Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. A lack of empathy. Compulsive lying and a lack of
Yeah,
empathy are the two hallmark traits of a sociopath
right.
or psychopath. And that's exactly what they have. They're basically, my ex and these court actors, they're basically a gang of psychopaths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've been literally gang stalked by a bunch of, sociopaths, psychopaths. Parents don't realize this is what is going to happen to you if you walk into family court. Stay out of there, because I had to deal with an opposing attorney, Garrett Arthur Taylor, who I was warned by another attorney. He's a perpetual liar. He is a problem to the family law community. And yeah, no empathy at all. It's like looking into lizard eyes. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. There's nothing there.
No.
It's like there's nothing like my ex also, his eyes are nearly black. And there's absolutely nothing there. It's like a stone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, so now I'm going to go back a little bit to June 2nd, 2020. My ex had me arrested for driving by the side of the marital home that's located on the corner of a road. And so I'm running errands that day, and in the parking lot, there are 7 cop cars and at least a dozen cops that came to arrest me. You'd think that there were actual real criminals to arrest that day. They did not
Yeah.
have, yeah, they did not have a warrant for my arrest. And I refused to get out of my car because they didn't even know why they were coming to arrest me. They only knew that they had to arrest me, which
Oh,
was
that's
bizarre.
bad.
Yeah. And so I wouldn't get out of the car until I saw a warrant for my arrest. And one of
Right.
the cops said to me, he said, if you don't get out of the car, I'm going to tear you out of the car. And so I got out of the car and they cuffed me again, my hands behind my back, like I was the violent criminal.
Hmm.
And I was detained overnight and arraigned the next day. And for that year and a half after, I would have this criminal case now pending against me. So not only was my ex able to weaponize the family court, but now he's able to weaponize the criminal court against me. In September 2020, my ex had the charges upped to endangering the welfare of a child. So again, he's accusing me of doing that which he is guilty of, which is
Mhm.
he's the one endangering the well-being of our children. And he lied to the DA and said that I posted on Facebook that I threatened to kill him. But no, he was never able to produce that post. You would think that that would be the easiest piece of evidence to produce. If
Mhm.
I actually wrote something like that on Facebook, he should be able to produce that, but he wasn't able to. So, I mean, his pathological lying is just unbelievable.
Mhm.
Lying is like breathing for him.
Ah.
And so eventually, that criminal case, those charges were dismissed, but, not without um, draining me both financially and emotionally for a year and a half. So, I mean, people should know where their tax dollars are going to.
Most definitely. Well, where the police probably could have been helping someone where a criminal was breaking into their home, here they are detaining you and ripping you out of your car, and they don't even have a
Exactly.
warrant from a judge.
Exactly. And again, this all stems from me trying to protect my kids. That's what it
Mm.
all goes back to, which is just unbelievable. In August of 2020, my daughter had turned 18. So she was no longer legally under the jurisdiction of the family court. So
Hmm.
I'm thinking, great, now I'll be able to see her.
Mm.
And there was about a couple of weeks during the summer that there was no order of protection against me because the order of protection had expired. And so I reached out to my daughter. I called her on the phone and she didn't pick up. And, but she did see that I called and, at least she knew that I was thinking about her.
Hmm.
Soon after that, Jessica Ressler, my ex's attorney, she sent an email to the court asking that the judge, at that time was Judge Rademacher, that he renew the order of protection against me because I reached out to my daughter, who's over
Oh,
18 years old. Now, Judge Rademacher, after that, he scheduled a court appearance and just issued the order of protection, just like that, including my daughter's name on the order, even though she was no longer under the jurisdiction of the court. And to this day, my daughter is going to be 23 this summer. She's married. She never filed a motion in court asking for an order of protection against me. And to this day, every single order that's been renewed against me by three judges uh, have contained her name. They included her name on the order,
and she
which
doesn't
is
even know
just
it.
that very possible, certainly possible. And if she does, I'm sure some bogus story and lies were told to her where she probably thinks that the judge did it on their own or something like that. Because I heard, when people would approach my ex and ask him, how could you make your wife pay child support to you, or how could you put your wife in jail? He would always blame it on either his attorney or the judge. He would say,
Uh-huh.
"Oh, the judge is making her pay child support," and
Oh, it's
people
not
buy it.
me.
Right. People don't realize that he's the one who actually had to file that application for child support because the judge can't just simply issue an order for child support. He's the one who has to initiate the application, but he failed to mention that part. So if you
Hmm.
haven't been through the system, you don't know how it works. So I bet my daughter's being told plenty of lies. And going back to also Jessica Ressler, how she was able to just you can't just send an email to the court. That's asking for a legal remedy. That is ex parte
Partake.
communication. It's illegal.
Hmm.
She had to have filed a properly noticed motion, given me the opportunity to oppose. There should have been a hearing. But because
Hmm.
she didn't have any good cause to file, she is sending this illegal ex parte communication to the court in forms of letters and emails, and the court is giving her relief based on that, which is completely illegal and
She
a
knows she can
violation
get
of
away
law
with
and
it.
procedure.
Sorry.
That's all they kept, they all kept doing that throughout,
Oh,
constantly. The attorneys for the children, Jessica Russell and her associate Meredith Kenyon, they all kept doing that. And
ah,
of course, if I would do that, I would never get any relief. I had to always go through, the motions and the months and months of drawn out, filings and whatnot. So, that was also very one-sided.
I
My,
may I
yeah.
may have said this in the last podcast. This reminds me of the Victorian era when guys were tired of their wives or whatever. They just put them in mental institutions.
Yes, yeah, and unfortunately that's still being done
Hmm.
nowadays also.
Sorry, I didn't
It's
mean to
it's
interrupt.
terrible. No, it's okay. It's awful that they're doing that. It's just horrible. Um yeah, so my ex, after my daughter turned 18, sometime after that, my ex hired an attorney for my daughter. His name is Mark Green, and he was the second attorney for the child in the Thomas Valva case. So that gives you an idea as to his character. He was a third party attorney. The judge actually put it on the record that, he's a third party attorney. He was not appointed by the court. And I objected to him being part of our case. And
Hmm.
he was not allowed to be part of our case if I objected to him, and he's a third party attorney. But yet the judge still kept accepting his input on the record. And I don't even think that my daughter even knew what was going on, because when Mark Green would send correspondence to the court, he would not specify how my daughter was copied on the correspondence. And when I would send him an email asking him, is my daughter getting the correspondence? How is she copied on it? He would just ignore me. So he wouldn't answer my emails. And it's just incredible how, and Mark Reed himself, he would put on the record, he would say that my daughter she aged out, she phased out, but yet he would still show up. I mean, that just totally did not make sense. And and then in the end, as per the final divorce decree, the judge granted my ex's request that I pay 50% of Mark Green's retainer on top of all that. Yeah. So, I mean, there's just so much misconduct. It's just so many civil and constitutional violations and so much cruelty. It's just unbelievable. In January 2021, um, we Judge Rademacher left, and Judge Erica Prager became the third judge on our case. And she was no different than the others. She was just as rogue and corrupt. And one time she just emailed me a renewed order of protection against me, just an email. I opened my email and there's an order of protection. It was just unbelievable. There was no scheduled court appearance, no court appearance. Of course, no motion being filed by my ex showing good cause as to why he would need an order of protection against me. Again, Jessica Russler sent an ex parte letter to the court.
Hmm.
Her reason was that she forgot to ask for the judge to renew the order of protection at the last court appearance. So she's asking for that now. And my ex needs the order of protection against me, because if he doesn't have it, then I'm going to reach out to the kids. So, and so the judge just simply emailed me a renewed order of protection.
Uh,
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, it's just, yeah, you can't make this stuff up.
no, no, people don't believe it. Now, there were not any cameras in your courtroom at all, were there?
No, they wouldn't allow it. That's another thing. They don't allow cameras, they don't allow recording, again, because that means, the corruption will be exposed and all the terrible things that go on in there will be exposed. So
Hello,
yeah, it's not allowed.
taxpayer. Hmm.
Oh, I mean, it's so simple. If you just put cameras in every courtroom, they wouldn't be able to get away with most of it.
Right. I
There's
agree.
no way. There's no way. I mean, the two main things that keep these criminal courts, I mean, these criminal family courts going, are the gag orders and not being able to record, no cameras in the courtroom. I'm sure there's more, but those are two big factors.
Yeah, that's why I say abolish it and just go to civil court and everything can be recorded with tamper-proof mics would be helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, the courts should be dismantled and abolished for sure. And also they're doing more harm than good. It makes no sense that when there's a violent criminal that's a stranger, you can go to criminal court and that person will be prosecuted in criminal court. But if you have a family member that's violent and the threat, and you're forced to live with them, and the threat and the danger of being with them is ever present, you can't go to criminal court. You're forced to go to family court, where not only are they not prosecuted, but they are protected and enabled. So the whole system makes no sense. None of it.
No, when they should be going through the criminal court.
Exactly. Exactly. I haven't heard a single story regarding family court of them prosecuting child abusers or pedophiles.
Mhm.
I haven't heard a single case like that. That doesn't even add up. That makes no sense.
It's not their, I'm not a lawyer, but maybe it's not their jurisdiction to even do that. They just make up the law as they go along.
Right. Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's a kangaroo court. It's a circus. The law is irrelevant. And yeah, and like you said, they just make up their own rules and laws
Hmm.
based on whim or whatever. But it's a shame because, like, there's nowhere to go with these violent criminals and child abusers that are family members. You're forced to go to family court. Uh, yeah, and so with going back to this order protection, the ex parte order protection that I got emailed to me, I what I did was I filed a 5704 emergency application with the appellate court for that, hoping to get relief from the appellate court, but they denied it. They denied my application. They didn't give a reason why. Their denial was one sentence. My application is hereby denied, signed by the judge. The fact that they wouldn't give me a reason is interesting and unusual. And the law was clearly on my side. I was asking for minimal relief. I was asking the appellate court to direct the trial courts to give me a hearing. And they wouldn't even do that, which is no sweat off their back. But I've seen I to date I have filed three applications with the appellate court and they were all denied when the law was clearly on my side, and the family court clearly did not do the right thing in all three of those cases.
They
What
never
I've
do.
seen, they never do, right?
Ugh.
And what I've seen this pattern between, my cases in the appellate court and other litigants that are targeted and persecuted by the family courts, they do not end up getting relief from the appellate court. And
Hmm.
so I've seen enough of a pattern to see that the appellate courts are aligned with the family courts.
Hmm.
And, it just makes you wonder, who are these judges really? If you haven't been through the system, you hear the words judge and court and you think that that's synonymous with justice, but
Mm-mm.
it's so far from the truth.
Well, in fact, that you mentioned appellate court, I had a case in there too. It only lasted 3 months and it was dismissed. So
Wow.
I don't know if anyone's getting any remedy. I think I told you that I had a case in federal court that I kept alive for 1 year. And when I went to drop off
Mhm.
exhibits to the opposing attorney for CPS, and he hauled me into a boardroom and said, I'm going to tell you how this case is going to go. I know both those judges in the federal courthouse, and this is how this case is going to go. I'm going to get this dismissed. And that's pretty much what's going to happen. Something to that effect. So if anyone says anything weird to you, slap it into an affidavit. Affidavits are gold. Like I said, I'm not an attorney. No
Right.
such good thing. There's no such thing as good legal advice, but I do know that about affidavits because that got him into trouble.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know for sure. For people to know that, absolutely. Um,
Mm.
in January 2022, Judge Erica Prager left, and now we have our fourth judge on the case. Her name is Judge Elizabeth Fox McDonough. So I've had five attorneys in my case, and my ex will use that, as another way to show that I'm crazy. He'll
Ugh.
of course lie. He'll say she had six, seven, eight attorneys. But I mean, there's been four judges in our case, so five attorneys is not that crazy
No.
considering. Yeah. And so Judge Elizabeth Fox McDonough, she's very erratic. She's very temperamental. She has a hard time controlling her emotions.
Oh,
And
there's someone who
yeah,
needs a psych eval.
yeah, absolutely.
Oh my God.
And before this, she was the supervising judge of Nassau County District Court, which is the criminal court, which is highly ironic considering that she was fully protecting and enabling my ex, who's a sadistic abuser.
Hmm.
But it's all gaslighting. It's all deflection. When you see the inscription, "In God we trust," in every courtroom on top of the judges. I
Mm.
mean, these court actors, they're demonic. They're
Hmm.
satanic. They don't, their God is Satan. And, again, like the best interest of the child, they keep citing that when they do just the opposite. And, you have to keep calling the judge your honor when they have no honor. So
No.
it's all inverted, all of it.
Yeah, just refer to them
It's
as judge. People can do that.
right, right, right. Yes, you can. That is true.
Oh.
Um, and so Judge Fox McDonough, she does not allow me to speak. She gives me a very hard time putting my, putting what I need to say on the record. And she would say to me constantly that I'm interrupting when I wasn't. And
Hmm.
if you read the court transcripts and you didn't know me or my case, you would think I am this rude litigant that lacks court decorum, but that was hardly the case. And she wouldn't even let me speak, to the point where if I would start talking, what she would do often was that she would speak over me. So you literally, you know, the stenographer can only dictate one person. And of course, it's going to be the judge and not me. So whatever I would say would get lost and not put on the record.
You know,
In
they
March, yes.
they do that to bait you when they say, stop interrupting. You're interrupting. I've been in a court hearing where the opposing attorney would talk, then she would pause. So I thought, the way she's pausing is like she's asking a question with inflection in her voice. So I would start to answer, and then she would begin to talk. And then the judge would say, stop interrupting. I'm tired of you interrupting. And this happened like seven times. I'm going, what the F?
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
another attorney explained to me this is called baiting.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. That makes
So,
sense.
so,
Yeah.
oh, so sorry. Continue. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Um, so in March 2022, my ex filed yet another motion to hold me in contempt of court. And this time it's because I posted on Twitter X, I posted, "I miss my three," and I put three red heart emojis. I didn't even write the word children because I was too scared to write the word
Right.
children. So because I wrote, "I miss my three," and put three red heart emojis,
Mhm.
my ex felt compelled to file a motion to hold me in contempt for that. And so he did. And in his motion, he asked that if I do not remove that tweet, that I be incarcerated again at Nassau County Correctional Facility. And by the way, Nassau County Correctional Facility, if you go online and read reviews, they say it's worse than Rikers Island. I was there for 24 hours and the living conditions are just horrifying. So I had enough after 24 hours. He
Mm.
also asked that I be sanctioned $38,000 for this tweet. And and the judge actually entertained it. Instead of dismissing his motion for frivolous and malicious prosecution, she actually entertained it, and she rendered a decision that there needs to be a hearing because of my tweet that I missed my three red heart emojis.
What a waste of taxpayer dollars.
Exactly. Exactly. And um yeah, and it's unbelievable that he would do that. It's just like these narcissistic sociopaths, it's just never enough evil for them. They just don't know when to stop.
No,
Um, yeah, it's just unbelievable. And so at that time, at that time and at that point, I had kept asking for a hearing for these unlawful orders of protection that are being filed against me. And so finally, and of course also I was also asking for a hearing going back to the first emergency order of protection that I had filed on behalf of my kids, that to this day, it's been 6 years that I had never received a hearing for that.
no.
Because my 2 days of testimony were declared a mistrial. So I never got a hearing for that to this day. So finally, at that point, when my ex filed the motion for contempt, the judge no, when the judge rendered the decision for the contempt motion, she finally agreed to give me a hearing for all those unlawful orders of protection against me, because obviously she was going to use the contempt motion as leverage.
Uh,
So that was the only way I was finally able to get a hearing date, because she lumped it together with a contempt. And I'm pro se at that time, and the judge does not want me to be pro se. So she appoints a court appointed attorney, despite my objection, just to represent me on a limited basis for the contempt hearing and the hearing for the orders of protection against me.
mhm.
That attorney did not end up representing me because at that time I had a benefactor that hired his good friend, a matrimonial attorney, to represent me also on a limited basis only for the financial part of my divorce. So it just made sense as a strategy at that time that I had exhausted all else as far as seeing my kids. Every motion possible was filed. So the idea was to go after the marital assets that my ex was controlling and hiding. And hopefully that would force him to come to the table, take our divorce out of court, settle our divorce, and then I'd be able to see my kids.
Mhm.
I had offered my ex several times that I was willing to give up every dollar of equitable distribution, every penny of it. Um, Child support, maintenance, every bit, just to see my kids, and he still said no. So, there was no choice but to go after his marital assets,
Mhm.
our marital assets, actually.
Mhm.
Um, and so my fifth attorney that was hired on a limited basis for financial only, his name is David Seidemann, and um, and the judge did not allow him to proceed with taking my case only for financial reasons,
Oh,
based only on the financials, because of course she was also protecting my ex and his financial interests. So she didn't want an attorney just to go after that. So she forced this attorney to take all of it, and so he did. Um, and this attorney, David Seidemann, at the consultation, he said to me, he sounded so confident that he was going to go after my ex, after the marital assets, and that would force him to settle. And his exact words that he used was, he said, I'm going to give him a colonoscopy regarding the financials.
hmm.
And, but then, of course, after I hired him, David Seidemann and his associate, he completely changed his tune and he said to me, he's not going after the marital assets at all. He's not pursuing the financials because that's going to make me look vindictive to the judge, which is just ridiculous because family court is a court of equity, of equitable distribution. That's precisely what's done in family court.
Mhm.
And these marital assets were also rightfully mine. When I married my ex, we had humble beginnings. I married him for love, or
Mhm.
so I thought.
Mhm.
And we had accumulated substantial marital assets together after we were married. So, according to the law, I had every right to those assets just as much as he did. But my fifth attorney, David Seidemann, refused to go after the financial assets. So there goes. Like again, he's refusing to do discovery, depositions, hold my ex in contempt for not complying with the forensic accountant, all that. Um, and just for a second, regarding forensic accountant, they're also so-called neutral, but they're not because again, they're all aligned with the judge because they're counting on repeat business. He was
Mhm.
supposed to submit his report of which was an appraisal of our marital assets by March 25th, 2019, and he did not. And he was supposed to tell the court that my ex was not complying with the order, and he did not. He never did any of that. So again, it's because, they're all part of the club.
And they're being paid off generously, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, exactly, exactly. But in the end, I was forced to pay for it. As per the final divorce decree, they made me pay for it in the end. And so, regarding my fifth attorney, so obviously, just yeah, my fifth attorney that's not doing the right thing. And he would, for example, like when we were standing outside the courtroom waiting for the court to open, my attorney would be chatting with my ex and recommending restaurants to him. Now, that's not a violation, but it's just so inappropriate and
Hmm.
unprofessional. And with my fifth attorney, David Seidemann, on December 31st, 2022, he breached attorney-client privilege. He had called me with his associate on the phone. It was a Saturday night, and my music was on. And I asked him just to give me a second to go close my music. He must have thought that I put the phone down, but I was holding the phone to my ear. And I heard him confirm on the phone with this woman that I knew that she's there on the phone. And just to give you a very brief history, long story short, this woman was close to my ex at one point, and she approached me that she wanted to help me. And then she insisted on sitting in on all my attorney meetings with me. And then it got to a point where I told her that I don't want her to sit in on the meetings anymore, that I'd like to have my conversations with my attorney be completely confidential. And I told this to my attorney as well and to her. But yet here he is sneaking her on the phone behind my back. We had our conversation. He did not bring her up at all on the phone. I was waiting to see if he would mention her name. He did not. So, and after that, of course, when I confronted him about it, he said I was crazy and imagining things, even though I had proof of it. But it's just incredible that when you call out people on their behavior, that is when they start calling you crazy and
Hmm.
delusional. My ex the same way. If you expose his evil behavior, that is when they start a smear campaign and label you as crazy. So it was clear that I couldn't trust this attorney anymore. And so I had to fire him. So, and that was
Hmm.
that. And so after that, I am pro se again. Um,
Oh.
and then the judge scheduled a hearing for the another hearing. I'm sorry, she scheduled another date because everything got delayed because of all that I just mentioned. So she scheduled another hearing for the contempt against me for February 26, 2024. And the court was just setting me up for failure. Of
Uh-huh.
course, it's just so obvious. So I'll give you one example. Dr. Yohananoff's report, the custody evaluator's report, the court would not release his second report to me, would not even let me read it unless I signed an affirmation that I will not quote verbatim from the report. I can only paraphrase. So if I, an attorney or an expert witness, were to cross-examine Dr. Yohananoff on the stand, none of us, we may not quote verbatim from the report, we can only paraphrase, which is ridiculous because how can you effectively challenge and cross-examine a report if you can't quote from it directly?
Mm-mm.
It just makes no sense. You just can't make this up. I mean, this is just ridiculous. And if I were to quote verbatim from the report, then I'm subject to sanctioning by the court, to being sanctioned by the court. And and also, in addition to that, they wouldn't give me a copy of the report. I can only read it in the court. And the notes that I write are also, I cannot write word for word. I can only generalize and take, general notes of the report,
Mm.
which is just absolutely ridiculous. And so the judge kept stating on the record that my tweet that I missed my three and the three red heart emojis is runs the risk of me being incarcerated yet again. And the writing was on the wall. And so I left town because I was not safe there. I was surrounded by criminals, my ex, the judges, the attorneys, and they had incarcerated me twice illegally already. So what's to stop them from doing it a third time?
Mm-hmm.
So I had no choice and I left.
Mm-hmm.
And I and then after I left Long Island, I reactivated my Facebook account and I posted several posts, including that, more about my son being abused and, the devastation of being kept from my kids. At that point, it was 4 years.
Mm.
That compelled my ex to file yet another contempt motion in court. And so he did, based on my new Facebook posts. Judge Fox McDonough, what she did was she lumped the two contempt hearings, she lumped together the hearing for I miss my three red heart emojis, which was what I posted on Twitter X, and my new Facebook posts. And she combined that into one trial. And she proceeded to conduct and have a trial without me, which is just unbelievable because in criminal court, I would have more rights. I mean,
Right.
in criminal court, the defendant needs to be present for there to be a trial. It's a Sixth Amendment right that a litigant has a right to be present at their trial and to defend themselves. But here they are, and they went ahead and had the Salem witch trial without me. Just so unbelievable. And then the judge convicted me of 4 counts of stalking, harassment, and aggravated harassment, both for civil and criminal contempt.
Oh,
And she did not put the exact sentencing on the record. And I think that there's a calculated reason for that. And it's just amazing how, posting that you miss your kids and posting that you're worried about your kids and you're trying to protect them and they're being abused, that now amounts to stalking and harassment when the actual stalker and harasser is my ex. So,
mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just unbelievable gaslighting and unbelievable cruelty. And
Yeah,
so now that, yes,
I don't know if I
sorry.
would set foot into that courtroom ever again, because they'll
Oh,
jail
yes,
you.
absolutely. It's dangerous for me. I'm not safe there.
Mm-mm.
I'm absolutely not safe.
And this is how he treats the mother of his children. Happy Mother's Day.
Right,
He's a
right. Yeah,
disgrace.
yeah. I mean, he's just so incredibly cruel. It's
Mhm.
unbelievable. And And yeah, the judge on the record, she said that she found my ex credible, which is just laughable because there was no one there to cross-examine him. In the court of law, how do you find a witness credible if there's no one there to cross-examine them?
Mm-hmm.
And now that they drove me out of town, they can go ahead and take everything from me, which they did. So the judge proceeded to give my ex custody of our kids. Up until then, he had custody by default because of all of the unlawful orders of protection against me. So now he officially got custody. And then she went ahead and did a financial inquest without me and basically gave my ex everything he asked for. Now, even in an inquest, if one litigant is not present, the judge is still required, in the interest of justice, to make sure that there's a fair and equitable outcome. But of course, she did not do that. And she proceeded, my ex asked for everything. Basically, she proceeded to give my ex millions of dollars of our marital assets. She gave him power of attorney of the marital home so that he can take my name off the deed and do whatever he wants with the house. And that house is worth over $4.5 million. And so he got the house as well. She he then proceeded, he then asked that I pay for his attorney fees, most of the custody evaluators fees, the forensic accountant, the attorneys for the children, the third party attorneys, 50% of that retainer, and just a bunch of other fees that I pay for. She granted that to him as well. So she took everything from me, placed me further into debt, placed me into a much further financial destitute position, but that wasn't enough either. He asked on top of that that the judge grant that I owe him $50,000, of which $30,000 is a lump sum of child support that I owe him. And he knows that I'm financially destitute. He knows that I'm not able to pay him. The court knows that, he's earning a seven-figure
Mm-hmm.
income. He has also, in addition to that, he has lots of questionable cash. And yet they're forcing me to pay him a lump sum of $30,000 of child support that I cannot pay. It's just really, there are no words. And that wasn't enough for my ex. I had a bank account with about $700 left. He had child support freeze that, the last $700 in that account.
You know,
And yes,
how do you spell Judge Elizabeth Fox McDonough's last name?
so Fox McDonough is, I believe, it's Fox hyphen MC capital DONOUGH, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Hmm.
And and that wasn't enough for my ex either, or for the court. The judge granted my ex's request for a 5-year order of protection on behalf of my kids and him, the sadistic and violent abuser. And yeah, and she granted that to him and put my oldest daughter's name on it. She'll be 23 this summer and she's married. My son will be 18 this summer. My youngest daughter will be 18 in 2 years. So all of my kids will be no longer under the jurisdiction of the court while this order is in effect. So, this is and that's the most devastating part of all, of course, because it's just been, absolutely devastating that I haven't seen or spoken to my kids all these years. It's been over 5 years, and so devastating for my kids. Um, so yeah, the grief has been just overwhelming. I couldn't even put it into words. And so
Mm.
yeah, that's pretty much, what they do to mothers who try to protect their kids. And
Mm-hmm.
because I tried to protect my kids, everything was taken from me. My home, financial security, my reputation, my dignity, my freedom, my right to speak, and most heartbreaking of all, my children. And, it's been 6 years of hell, but I'm never giving up on my kids. I'm going to never stop fighting for them.
It's just so they're aided and abetted by these horrible individuals to destroy the relationship. And what's really weird is people say it's this patriarchy that is ruining this family court system. But what happened to feminism? So these female judges can't stand up to these patriarchal male judges and say, "Oh, I'm not gonna follow that ruling. I'm gonna rule this way." What? They can't
Right.
think for themselves,
100%. I think that it's not a male female thing. It's about good versus evil. And
right?
unfortunately, there's lots of evil women in this business as well. The two attorneys for the children in my case, they're mothers themselves. They have children. Like, where's their heart? Where's their conscience? So it's about good and evil. It's not about man versus woman.
Right, right. I think there's another case similar to yours where um, the father was trying something about an Amazon card that was sent to the child, and the child ordered stuff from Amazon, so he got zapped for that. Like
Wow.
stupid stuff. We're talking stupid stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredible. You just can't make this stuff up.
People don't believe this
You
when
know?
when they hear this. Um,
No, they don't.
that Judge Erica you had, how do you spell her last name?
Erica Prager. Yeah, sure. Prager. And she was the third judge on our case.
Okay, let me see here. All right, let me see here. Hmm. I found this nifty website called USA Transparency.
Okay.
You can actually, okay, so when you're in a court case,
Hmm.
go in here and look up and see the contributions that people have made and who are they that have made these
Hmm.
contributions. Um, Hang on here, and you have to go by the state just so you know. Um, Let me see here. Okay, so Rademacher, what is his name, full name?
Thomas Rademacher.
Okay. How do you spell that's R-A-D,
Rademaker.
okay, Radgemake.
Rademaker.
Oh, oh, I almost had it. Dang it. Okay, Rade. I'm like
Yeah, that's okay. Rademaker.
something that simple. Okay. Okay, so he was a candidate. Now, this is really weird because it's showing financial activity on him when he was a financial candidate.
Oh, that's interesting.
Now it says okay, contributors, top contributors. It says no records, no records. But let me see here. Contributions. Let me click on that. I don't know if they hide stuff or maybe I don't know what they're doing,
Mm,
expenditures, but there was something there. Like
okay.
I had looked up a judge and it was actually his daughter's judge campaign where I found out my opposing attorney donated $500 to it. See what I'm saying? And it was on there. It was on this Transparency USA.
Right.
So
Right. No, yeah, that makes sense.
So now you have no access to your kids. You're you can't really set foot back. I mean, I wouldn't set foot into New York State for anything.
Yeah, I mean, they're clearly, out to get me.
Yes. Yes, and there's I don't know why these judges are here you have nothing. They're calling you crazy, and then they want child support out of you. None of that adds up. And the taxpayer needs to know this when you've got people that are like vice presidents of companies, millionaires,
Mhm.
going after someone with no money. That makes no sense.
Yeah, it's just to, I think the goal is to break me. I think that was the goal. They just were not successful, but they tried every which way to break me.
Oh,
And, and they to destroy me every which way, financially, emotionally, taking my kids from me. And it's very unfortunate. There are some really sad stories of mothers who have taken their lives,
mm-hmm,
and they have been broken by the system. But I am my children's only lifeline, so I'm not going anywhere.
mm-hmm,
I'm going to continue fighting for them.
mm-hmm. Right. I would too. I did too. It's these weird female judges are scarier than the male ones. That's what I think.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
yes, sometimes it does work. I mean, I don't know what
Oh.
it is, but I can't understand the psychology behind it. But yeah, I mean, the woman is supposed to be the nurturer. She's, supposed to be the one with empathy and compassion. And yet these women are just, they're just cold. There's no empathy there at all.
Yeah, and
Just a lot of cruelty and evil.
they're out for blood.
Yeah. Hmm.
I don't know how
Absolutely.
else to describe it.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's money. A lot of it is greed,
Hmm.
but there's an extra component of no empathy and being cruel. And and yeah, I mean, and the attorneys, the matrimonial attorneys also, I mean, they're guilty of that as well because, they're taking money off, on at the expense of others, other people's pain and misfortune and grief, the
Hmm.
expense of suffering children. So they're enriching themselves and lining their pockets. And when they
Hmm.
know there is nothing they could do or would do, like I've seen in my case, I've come to the realization that even if I had the best attorney, if I by some miracle
Hmm.
found the best, most competent, ethical attorney that's willing to fight for my kids, I'm not sure that there's much they can do because if
Hmm.
you have a judge that is completely corrupt and rogue, they're going to sabotage, every effort made by that attorney. So I don't know that there's much that they can do, but it is unethical for attorneys to keep taking money.
Hmm.
It's blood money, basically.
Hmm.
It's money that I didn't have, money that I'm every penny trying to get my kids back. And they're taking that money knowing that there isn't much that they could or would do. And in most cases, they end up doing more harm than good.
Right, especially when she appointed that third party parasite that was on the Thomas Belva case.
Yes, Mark Green, who was a second attorney for the child in the Valva case. Yes. Yeah, he was hired by my ex. Yeah.
That's sick. I mean, uh,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
how do you want to do you warn parents like when you see people or people you made friends with?
You know, I think it's really important to expose this, to spread awareness, to expose people that are hurting children. It's just incredibly important because that's the only way to ever get to justice and accountability is if people speak out.
Mhm.
But as far as actually like going up against the family court system, I mean, it's um, like you said, the only way is for it to be abolished and to be dismantled. And the best advice I have is, choose wisely when choosing a partner and the
Oh,
father of your children so that you don't end up at the mercy of family court.
isn't
Um,
that the truth?
yeah, absolutely. If you end up with the wrong person, it'll be tragic for you and your kids. You won't get away unscathed. So, if something feels off about a person, it usually is off.
Yep.
Listen to your
Hmm.
intuition. Your gut feelings usually do not lie to you. And so when you're with someone and you detect red flags, leave after the first red flag.
Right. Exactly. If it doesn't feel right,
Yeah.
and how do I say this? You don't have to have someone in your life. Sometimes my mother had told me, sometimes you're better off being alone than have some nutcase in your life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're with the wrong person, you're going to be far lonelier with the wrong person than you will be alone.
Hmm. Hmm.
So absolutely,
And do
you
your
know,
background checks on not just him or her, but their parents. If there's any connections to any type of courthouse, drop them
oh,
like a hot potato and run.
absolutely, absolutely, for sure. I agree.
Now, I'm so glad I had you on. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Um, I can't think of anything offhand now, but thank you so much for having me back and giving me the opportunity to share some of my story. I mean, this is just, little bits and pieces. There's so much more. But if I were to like list uh, every violation, all the misconduct, we would be here for days. But
Same.
thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it, Marianne. Thank you.
Well, you're helping to educate others and giving others encouragement to speak out. And that's what these poor parents need.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
do you want me to
Yeah,
put your, oh, go ahead.
yeah, I'm sorry. Just for the value, like when you hear somebody else speak out and tell you story, and there's another mother that's going through this, and she's not aware that this is happening at scale,
Hmm.
in family courts, she starts to doubt her sanity. Maybe I am crazy. I mean, how could I be the only one that this is happening to? But,
Hmm.
hearing other people's stories, you realize that this is deliberate and you're not crazy.
Right. Right. People need to know. And, your story's been consistent. And, like I know this great dad who should be having custody of his kid, and they've messed with his Second Amendment rights. Like, I don't know why some of this, like your case, I don't know why this stuff isn't on mainstream media.
It should be. Um, it's certainly so important to expose these judges, but for some reason, mainstream media is staying away from this. And I saw it very clearly in the Thomas Valva case, how Judge Goodstein was able to keep his name out of the media, out of the papers. When he was a supervising judge, he knew every detail what happened in that Thomas Valva case because he's a supervising judge. There are only 6 judges in Nassau County Supreme Court in the Matrimonial Center. So he was complicit in Thomas Valva's murder. And it was amazing how these judges were able to stay out of the news. So there's definitely something there,
Right. Right. Also, they keep the attorneys out of the news as well.
that too. Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
and that was Robert Goodstein.
The first judge, Judge Jeffrey Goodstein.
Oh, it's Jeffrey.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just seeing here. Um, what's on what I can find. Jeffrey Goodstein, Stein.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, as a candidate. Let me see here. Let's see if anything comes up. Oh, okay. Here's a good one. Jeffrey Goodstein has had total contributions of $2,010. And okay, so top contributors is Jeffrey Goodstein, $1,160. Jeffrey, again, 850. View all contributors. And that's all he has. So contributions. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Okay, we're talking October of 2024. $500, Jeffrey Goodstein. October 21st, 2024. $350, Jeffrey Goodstein. 300 again in 2024 of September. So there's only one page
Okay.
of contributions. What he's contributing to himself. This is very
Mhm.
fascinating. How is that? Why?
Oh, that's interesting. It's contributions he's making to himself.
I mean, his name's there for the contributions.
Okay.
Jeffrey Goodstein. And so, okay, um, very strange. Um, I thought there would be like attorneys' names attached to that.
Okay.
But I mean, this is how you can look up. I don't know if you can see
Um, Not really. It's not that clear.
transparency. Well, just the
Oh yeah,
Transparency
I see.
USA.
Okay, I see that. Yeah.
Okay, so kind of I bring it back. Yeah, so I'm glad I had you on. We've learned so much from you. And I will put your email attached to your last podcast, which was EstherDeutzsch 2024 at gmail.com.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Well, hey, don't jump off, okay?
Thanks again, Marianne.
Oh,
Thank you.
anytime. Thank you. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube. Please like and subscribe. Apple, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, and other platforms. Feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. Thank you, Esther Deutsch, for speaking out. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.